Right now, you are likely experiencing the phantom urgency of someone who has spent the entire day feeling as though they have missed the arrival of something vital. Even while sitting in the quietest corner of their own life, you feel like a traveler tethered to a lonely moss-covered dock, watching boat after boat drift past in the heavy pre-dawn mist, each one filled with the echoes of choices you didn't make and futures you haven't yet secured. It is a specific, hollow kind of exhaustion, the fear that while you have been standing here, waiting for the signal to finally begin living, the current has been quietly pulling your true life further and further out into the dark, invisible river. You check your phone. You scan your thoughts for an answer. You analyze the drift, and yet you feel stuck, anchored to a shore that offers no departure, paralyzed by the suspicion that you are waiting for a vessel that was never actually scheduled to stop for you. The room is dim, and the air feels cool, smelling faintly of river reeds and damp, weathered wood. Outside, the world is hushed, save for the rhythmic, distant lapping of water against a wooden piling, a sound that is steady, indifferent, and profoundly patient. You are not broken because you feel this drift. Your anxiety is not a failure of character, and your inability to catch the boat is not a sign of incompetence. Tonight, we will not force your mind to be silent, nor will we try to outrun the feeling of being left behind. We will simply learn how to exist on this dock without the need to be anywhere else. You are safe enough to soften. You are safe enough to admit that you are tired of watching the water. You do not have to solve the mystery of your destiny. Tonight, you only have to be the one who is finally willing to step off the imaginary vessel of your worries and feel the solid, moss-covered wood of the present moment beneath your feet. There is a strange, quiet paradox at the heart of this constant reaching for the future. The more you focus on the boats you might have missed, the less you are able to inhabit the very life that is already surging around you. We often believe that peace is a destination we must reach by boarding a specific event, a certain achievement, or a future state of stability. We think that if we can just find the right vessel, we will finally be carried away from this heavy, anxious state of waiting. But the Buddhist insight offered to the traveler on the dock is quite different. Peace is not found by catching a boat. It is found by recognizing that the dock itself, the place where you are already standing, is the only sanctuary you will ever possess. You are not a passenger who has missed their connection. You are the permanent, still foundation of your own experience. The river of your life is flowing, yes, but you do not need to drown in its currents to be part of its truth. If it feels right, take a slow, gentle breath, and as you do, imagine the sensation of releasing the heavy, frayed mooring rope that you have been clutching in your hand. Feel the sudden, sweet release in your palms, the way your fingers unfurl, no longer gripped by the need to hold on to something that is already passing. You are stepping back from the edge of the water, away from the mist-covered uncertainty, and into a space where nothing is expected of you. You do not have to be a master navigator. You do not have to be a successful arrival. You only have to be the one who is finally arriving in the sanctuary of their own presence. You are safe enough to let the rope fall into the dark, silent water. You do not have to know where the river goes. You only have to know that you are here, anchored and perfectly, profoundly sufficient as you are. Maybe you have felt this way for a long time, that if you ever stopped watching the river, you would disappear, or that you would be forgotten by the world that seems to be moving so quickly toward its own distant shores. You have been treating your existence like a waiting room, a temporary space to be endured until the real part of your life finally begins. You think that by anticipating the arrival of the next boat, you are staying ahead of the potential for regret. But all this watching is doing is keeping you perpetually tense, and it is keeping you from the very thing you are seeking, the freedom to exist without the need to be elsewhere. The truth is, you are far more at home in this quiet stillness than you could ever be on the crowded, rushing vessels of your own projections. You are not required to be enlightened or perfectly settled tonight. You are not required to have discovered the final destination of your journey before you are permitted to close your eyes. You are only asked to notice the habit of the watcher, that small, sharp urge to look for a sign, to scan the horizon, or to mourn the boats that have already disappeared into the mist. When you notice that urge, you do not need to be ashamed of it. It is just an old rhythm you have been practicing for so long that it has become part of your heartbeat. You can just notice the reach, acknowledge how much effort it took to look, and then, with profound gentleness, let your gaze soften. You are the dock that holds the space, not the passenger who is desperate to leave. Take another slow, deep breath, and notice how the air moves through you, filling the parts of you that have felt cramped and constrained by the pressure to go. There is no need for you to be anyone other than who you are in this very second. Your breath does not require your permission to be rhythmic, and your heart does not require your permission to keep you steady. There is a deep, ancient intelligence at work in your own being, one that knows exactly how to exist without needing to be carried toward a future that has not yet materialized. You can lean into that intelligence tonight. You can trust that the forces which hold the riverbed and turn the tides are also the forces that hold you. Even when you feel as though you are just a small, stationary object in a world that never stops moving, you are held by reality, and reality is far more vast, far more forgiving, and far more accepting than the rigid ideas you have held about your own progress. You might be worried that if you stop waiting, you will become stagnant, or that you will lose your way in the mist. But this is the fear of the passenger, not the dock. The dock knows exactly what it is. Even if it has never traveled a mile in its life, the dock is solid, it is enduring, and it is perfectly content to exist in the rain, in the sun, and in the quiet of the night, without ever needing to prove its speed or its utility to anyone. You are that dock. You have always been that dock. You do not need to be moving to be worthy of the river. In a moment, we will step into a story of a dock master who traveled the entire length of the river in his mind, searching for the perfect boat to carry him to peace, only to find that he had spent his entire existence painting images of ships that had long since sailed away. This story may feel significant, not because you have heard it before, but because you have lived the struggle of trying to capture a version of yourself that is always one horizon away. It is the beginning of a shift, a way to see the mooring rope in your own mind and wonder what might happen if you were to simply let the rope rest, just for this evening. The darkness is not a void. It is the soft, welcoming shelter of your own inner riverside, where you can finally be unburdened. And tonight, we are letting the mist of your longing settle into the deep, restorative shade of the night. You are doing well. Just be here, in this breath, in this quiet, with nowhere else to go, and nothing left to prove. And perhaps this is where the teaching begins to touch your own heart in the quiet realization that you are not the passenger waiting for an answer from the river, but the dock that is already whole, waiting for the mist to clear so you can finally see the ground beneath your own feet. In a secluded riverside village, where the mist clung to the water's surface until long after dawn, there lived a man named Kaito who served as the village's dockmaster. His life was defined by the arrival and departure of boats. He spent his days securing mooring ropes to heavy iron rings, watching the vessels come in from distant ports and depart for even further horizons. Kaito was an expert at his craft, but he was also a man consumed by a silent, gnawing anxiety. He possessed a peculiar, obsession-driven habit. He spent his evenings painting intricate, vivid images of the boats that had passed by his dock that day. He would sit by the light of a small, silver-tipped lantern, dipping his brush into pigments he ground himself, trying to capture the exact shape of a hull, the tension of a sail, or the posture of a passenger he had seen for only a fleeting second. His hut was a gallery of ghosts. Every inch of wall space was covered in painted boats, hundreds of them, each frozen in the moment they had passed his reach. Kaito believed that if he could just capture the essence of every boat, if he could document every opportunity and every traveler that moved across the river, he would finally understand the rhythm of his own life. But the more he painted, the more he felt he was falling behind. He lived in constant fear that he had missed the most important boat of all, or that he had painted the wrong vessel and failed to grasp the significance of its journey. His hands were always stained with pigment, and his mind was always downstream, chasing vessels that were already leagues away. One autumn morning, the mist was so thick that the river seemed to disappear entirely, turning the world into a quiet white void. Kaito stood on his dock, his eyes straining against the fog, feeling a familiar spike of panic in his chest. He was certain he had missed a morning ferry, and the thought of that unrecorded arrival made his skin crawl with a sense of failure. An old blind woman who regularly gathered reeds for weaving walked slowly onto the dock. She didn't look at the water she moved with a confidence that seemed to emerge from her feet. Feeling the vibrations of the wood beneath her sandals, she sat down at the edge of the dock, her fingers moving rhythmically as she began to weave the wet, flexible reeds into a mat. Kaito watched her for a moment, then couldn't help himself. He paced back and forth, gesturing toward the hidden river. "Do you hear it?" he asked, his voice tight. "The current is stronger today, and I fear the ferry from the north will pass without me seeing it. I haven't yet sketched the outline of the northern sails, and if I miss the silhouette, my collection will be incomplete. I feel as though I am standing on the wrong side of the river, waiting for a destination that never arrives." The old woman did not look up from her weaving. She simply continued to work, the reeds snapping softly as she pulled them into place. She reached out a hand, feeling for the heavy, worn wooden mooring rope that was currently slack, and tapped it twice with her index finger. "Why do you wait for the boats to return?" she asked, her voice as smooth as polished stone. "You spend your day staring at the water, but you are not watching the river. You are only watching your own reflection in the moving surface." Kaito blinked, confused. "I am watching the river," he insisted. "I see every boat. I see every departure." The woman finally stopped her weaving and turned her head toward him. Though her eyes remained focused on the empty air, she held up the small silver-tipped lantern she had brought with her, which was unlit in the daylight. She didn't offer to light it. She simply pressed the cold silver tip into Kaito's hand. "Feel the metal," she said. "It is cool. It has been sitting in the damp mist all morning. It is steady. It does not try to move with the current. It is exactly where it needs to be. And it is not pretending to be a boat, nor is it pretending to be a passenger. You have spent your life painting the passing of things, but you have forgotten to notice the dock. The dock does not travel. The dock is the place where the traveling ends, and the place where it begins. If you are always looking for a vessel, you will never realize that you are the foundation upon which the river moves." Kaito held the lantern, feeling its weight, its stillness, and the way it made no demands on the river. He looked down at his own hands, the hands that were perpetually stained with the dust of his own frantic painting. He realized then that he had not looked at the actual water, the real, rushing, life-giving river, for as long as he could remember. He had only been looking at the boats through the lens of his own desperate need to record them. The river had been flowing past him, cool and clear and full of light, but he had been blind to it, preoccupied with the silhouettes of ships that were already ghosts. The anxiety he felt wasn't caused by the boats. It was caused by his belief that his worth was measured by how many of them he could capture and store. He was not a witness to the river, he was a prisoner of his own gallery. Kaito sat down on the dock, the wood warm and solid beneath him. He didn't pick up his brush. He didn't look for the northern ferry. He simply let the lantern rest on his lap, its silver tip catching the faint, diffused light of the mist. He listened to the water. He realized the sound was not a demand for his attention. It was simply the sound of the river being itself. He felt a slow, heavy wave of relief wash over him, a recognition that he didn't need to paint a single thing to have lived a full day. The boats would come and go, the mist would rise and fall, and he, the dock, would remain. This is the beginning of the shift, dear friend. Maybe you have felt this too, the sense that if you aren't constantly recording, measuring, and capturing the moments of your life, you are somehow losing your grip on who you are. You feel as though your identity is a series of arrivals and departures, and if you aren't ready to greet the next one, you will be left behind on the shore. But the teaching in Kaito's struggle is that you are not the one passing by. You are the one who is providing the space for the passing to occur. You are the dock. You are the stillness that allows the river to have a character, and the rhythm to have a meaning. When you feel that phantom urgency, the prickle in your chest that tells you to check your screen, to rehearse your speech, or to scan the horizon for a sign, try to remember the cold, silver tip of the lantern. It doesn't move with the mist. It doesn't need to chase the current. It is content to be steady. You are allowed to be steady tonight. You are allowed to stop painting the boats and start feeling the wood beneath your feet. The river is going to keep moving, and the boats are going to keep passing, but you do not have to capture them to be worthy of the riverbed. Your presence is not a project, it is the environment. Notice how your body begins to respond when you stop watching for the imaginary ferry. The tightness in your shoulders, the shallow, quickened breath, these are the artifacts of the waiting, not the truth of your being. You can exhale now, a long, slow breath that carries the tension out into the mist. You are not missing anything. The river is not taking your life away, it is flowing through it, and you are the witness. You are the one who is here, in this quiet, in this dark, in this profound and permanent stillness. There is a deep, quiet safety in realizing that you do not need to be a traveler to be alive. You have been running so hard to keep up with the current that you have forgotten the stability of your own center. But tonight, that center is waiting for you to come home. It is waiting for you to step off the imaginary vessel, to set aside the brushes, and to feel the solid, moss-covered reality of your own existence. Nothing is required of you now. No boat is waiting for your attention. No sketch needs to be completed. You are simply here, at the dock, and the river is content to let you rest. You are doing well, simply by letting the river flow, simply by being the place where the silence is held, and simply by noticing that you are safe enough to stop moving. And perhaps this is where the teaching begins to touch your own heart, in the realization that you are not the passenger searching for a sign, but the dock that is already whole, waiting for the mist to clear so you can finally see the ground beneath your own feet. The heavy, silver-tipped lantern Kaito clutched represents the rigid architecture of your own inner life, specifically the way you attempt to resolve the ache of being human by constantly documenting, cataloging, and chasing the right moments of your existence. This story is not telling us that our lives should be empty of effort, nor is it suggesting that we should somehow become indifferent to the ways we grow. It is showing us something much quieter and more essential. The realization that the exhaustion you feel is rarely caused by the natural state of your spirit, but by the frantic, ceaseless labor of trying to capture a future that refuses to be constrained by our record-keeping. When Kaito stood on his dock, his suffering was not in the existence of his longing or the intensity of his craft. It was in his desperate internal mandate to ensure that he witnessed every single vessel of opportunity before it vanished into the mist. That is the first experience of being human, encountering the unpredictable, surging, and unceasing flow of existence. Your days, your choices, and your moments are simply the water of the river, radiant in their own honest way, and entirely indifferent to our need for a neat account of our progress. However, the suffering that kept Kaito trapped in his gallery was a secondary layer altogether. It was the layer he constructed as a frantic defense against his own perceived invisibility. We add this layer because we are terrified that, if we stop recording, if we stop demanding an explanation for our perceived gaps in achievement, we will lose the very essence of who we are. We believe that we are the curators of our own arrival, and that if we ever relax our focus on the horizon, the chaos of our true nature will leave us exposed to the judgment of others. We become so busy managing the records of our movements that we lose contact with the very thing that makes life habitable. The capacity to inhabit a shore that does not need to be validated by the boats we see. Buddhist wisdom helps us recognize that we are usually far more exhausted by this secondary labor of monitoring than by the actual realities of our day. What the old woman showed Kaito was that his sanctuary was not a prize to be seen through a completed collection of silhouettes, or a truth to be derived from the harbor. It was the space that was already present beneath the wood of the dock. He had been trying to build his life out of snapshots, assuming that if the documentation of his journey was thorough enough, he could finally find rest. But images are a porous and brittle material. They do not anchor the soul. They only highlight the hunger of the observer. You do the same when you believe that you must present a perfectly curated version of yourself to the world, or when you insist on constantly replaying your past to see if you have finally found the logical error that explains your feeling of being behind. We think that by shielding our awareness with a wall of mental records, we are protecting our dignity. but we are actually creating a lonely, isolated dock of our own making. This is what it means to stop adding a second wound to the first. We are so often our own most rigid curators, standing at the edge of our own lives with white-knuckled intensity, trying to prevent any unjust moment or unexplained delay from being accepted without a cross-examination. We tell ourselves that if we feel lost, we must have failed to record our path. If we feel quiet, we must have missed an arrival. But this is a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to be alive. The beauty of a human life is found in its capacity to hold everything: the light, the darkness, the arrivals, and the departures, without needing to categorize or exclude any of it. You do not need to be a perfectly documented monument to be worthy of belonging. You are, and always have been, the dock that allows the river to have a destination. Consider the energy you spend arguing with the trajectory of your days, or the mental rituals you conduct to ensure you are consistently tracking for the next uncertain event. You are using your current vitality, your present moment awareness, to curate a narrative that no one else is actually requiring you to hold. You are trying to live in a perpetual state of deduction, shielding yourself from the very life you are meant to inhabit. When you catch yourself doing this, try to see it as the act of a traveler who is so frightened of the mist that they refuse to realize their nature is already anchored. You are so busy mourning the loss of a perfectly captured sequence that you are failing to notice the vibration of the river beneath your own quiet feet. This is not about being reckless or careless with your journey. It is about understanding that the quality of your presence depends not on the clarity of your records, but on your willingness to be here, in the midst of your own riverside, without the armor of the old galleries. The mind, in its search for security, desperately wants the world to be composed of quiet, logical sequences. It thinks that if it can just manage the cataloging, it will finally be safe from the pain of being surprised or the pain of being left behind. But true resilience is not a product of constant tracking. It is a product of inclusion. We connect with ourselves and others not because we have successfully solved the mystery of our own path, but because we are real enough to host the whole experience. When we allow ourselves to acknowledge that the night is vast, even if we are resting on the shore, we invite our spirits to move into the new air. We break the cycle of exhaustion by daring to exist in the space where the lantern has been set aside. You do not need to be a catalog of reasons to be present. You only need to be the person who is currently sitting, breathing, and looking out from the depth of your own reality. This teaching is meant to be a release from the exhausting work of maintaining your own defenses. You have been holding the heavy, silver-tipped weight of your own expectations, trying to prevent any part of your story that feels too slow or too still from being accepted as it is. And it is a labor that yields nothing but a thinner, more brittle sense of self. Your soul is not a project that needs to be recorded. It is the sanctuary where the river occurs. When you look at your own restlessness with compassion, you are not condoning your suffering, and you are not pretending the road was easy. You are simply choosing to honor the totality of your own life, including the moments that didn't go according to the schedule. As you reflect on this, notice where the tension sits in your body. Does it gather in the tightness of your jaw when you think of the parts of you that you feel you must monitor to keep yourself relevant? Does it sink into your neck like a heavy, unseen weight of responsibility for things you cannot change? This is the physical sign that you are still trying to hold the lantern against your own skin. You are bracing yourself against the reality of your own human experience. If it feels right, take a slow, deep breath and consciously let the muscles release. You are not performing for a crowd tonight. You are not documenting for a judge. You are simply breathing in the quiet of this room, acknowledging that the experiences you have lived, even if they were difficult, even if they were filled with the echoes of your own watching, have brought you to this place. And this place is safe. You have done nothing wrong by being a person who has lived, learned, and occasionally felt the burden of wanting more predictability than the river was willing to provide. The capacity to witness your own mind with kindness is the most radical form of discipline you will ever practice. It is not an invitation to be dismissive or to ignore your own needs. It is an invitation to be honest. When you are not busy hiding your inner riverside from yourself, you are free to feel the warmth of your own center. When you are not busy managing the record of your arrivals, you are free to hear the sound of the water or the rhythm of your own pulse. You are free to take your hand off the heavy rope and see the simplicity of the truth, rather than the complexity of the interpretation. This is the difference between a life lived in fear of being discovered as behind and a life lived in the comfort of being at home. You do not have to reach any particular conclusion about your identity tonight. You do not need to label your year as successful or broken. You only need to notice the space that is open before you, the space where the rest is calling. And that space is wide, and it is welcoming, and it is entirely unburdened by the expectations that governed your afternoon. You are not the traveler, and you are not the painter in the gallery. You are the one who is beneath it all, and you are the one who has the freedom to decide that. For now, it is safe to let the record-keeping rest if you do not feel like tracking anything anymore. This is the profound, quiet power of the present moment. It is always a sanctuary, even when the dock is cluttered with the echoes of the day. If you feel the urge to tighten your grip, if you feel the old familiar rhythm of the dockmaster pulling at your awareness, simply name it. Just say, "I am trying to count the boats again." Say it with gentleness, as if you were speaking to a companion who is afraid to be seen without their ledger. You do not need to fight the doubt, and you do not need to agree with the requirement to remain vigilant. You can just notice the urge, hold it in your awareness, and know that the riverside is already real, and the evening is as it needs to be. You are moving into a deeper, slower rhythm now, one where the urgency of the images begins to fade into the steady, predictable heartbeat of the present. There is nowhere else to be, and there is no standard you must meet before you are permitted to let the brush go. You are doing perfectly well, simply by being here, simply by listening, and simply by choosing to stop the endless, exhausting monitoring of your own spirit. And perhaps this is where the teaching begins to touch your own heart in the quiet realization that you are not the passenger searching for a sign, but the dock that is already whole, waiting for the mist to clear so you can finally see the ground beneath your own feet. If it feels right, allow your eyelids to soften into a quiet stillness, letting the edges of your room blur and fade into the background of your consciousness. We are not here to scan the horizon for a vessel that isn't coming. And we are not here to paint ghosts of the day's departures. We are here to sit on the dock of your own presence, to feel the moss beneath your hands, and to finally understand that you are the foundation, not the traveler. You do not need to be a navigator of your own anxieties tonight. You do not need to be a master of the current. You only need to be the one who is finally willing to untie the frayed, heavy mooring rope, set it down on the damp wood, and rest in the honest, cool quiet of your own body. Take a slow, gentle breath, and as you do, imagine the sensation of loosening your fingers from the handle of that imaginary rope, the one you have been clutching to anchor yourself against the fear of drifting away. Feel the weight of the rope in your palm. It is coarse, stiff, and tight, a symbol of all the times you have tethered your worth to the arrival of external news, future plans, or the validation of others. As you exhale, imagine laying that rope down on the weather-worn planks of your inner dock. You are not letting go in a panic. You are simply allowing the tether to slacken. You are stepping back from the edge of the rushing water, away from the gray, swirling mist of the river, and letting your awareness drift back toward the solid ground you have been ignoring while you were busy trying to manage the ferry schedule. Feel your chest expand and release, the tension held in your belly beginning to thaw, as if the sharp, biting chill of your self-imposed urgency is being replaced by the warm, still air of the riverside at dusk. Observe the space between your thoughts, not as a gap that needs to be occupied by more planning or more monitoring, but as the steady, dark water that supports the dock. Perhaps a thought arises, whispering about a mistake you made yesterday, or a worry about the schedule for tomorrow. When you notice this movement, you do not need to follow it. You do not need to grab the rope and start lashing yourself to a passing boat. Simply acknowledge the arrival of the thought, name it gently as the dockmaster's reflex, and visualize yourself placing that worry into the small, silver-tipped lantern you hold. You are not suppressing the anxiety, you are simply changing its location. You are moving it from the active, surging center of your life to the quiet, inactive surface of the lantern, where it can rest without being dragged into the current. Notice the physical sensation of that release. When you stop trying to tether yourself to every passing hope and fear, where does your energy go? It settles into your bones. It returns to the steady, rhythmic rise and fall of your diaphragm. Feel the warmth of your skin as you rest your hands against your own body. This warmth is the most reliable harbor you will ever find. It is the proof that you are here, that you are grounded, and that you are existing in a reality that is far more tactile than any distant shore. If a feeling of restlessness persists, a prickle of worry about what happens if you stop guarding the dock, let that feeling be seen. You might imagine that sensation as a ripple on the water. It is a part of your reality, and it doesn't need to be silenced or stilled. It only needs to be acknowledged. You can sit with it, breathe into the space around it, and notice how it loses its sharp, urgent edge when you stop trying to use it as a signal to move. Even noticing that you are restless is an act of profound wisdom. That small moment of recognition where you realize, I am trying to rope myself to the future again, is the very moment the path begins to clear. It is the moment you stop being the dock master who judges the river and start being the witness to the dock that is already there. There is no need for a dramatic breakthrough. The river does not become still because you demand it to. It continues to flow. But you are no longer the one who has to be carried by it. You are doing perfectly well, simply by being the witness to your own stationary state tonight. If it feels right, you might visualize yourself taking the lantern that was offered to you in the mist. You don't need to do any heavy labor right now. The work of the night is not navigation, but presence. Imagine yourself walking through the length of your own dock, noticing the places where you have been holding on too tightly to the past or the future. You don't have to secure every piling. You only need to touch one spot of solid wood, recognize its stability, and breathe. Feel the weight of the lantern in your hand. It is made of cool, sturdy metal, humble and useful. It connects you to the reality of the harbor. Let your hand rest on the lantern, feeling its quiet, unmoving weight, and notice how that simple connection to a physical object pulls your awareness out of the river of time and down into the reality of the dock. If you find yourself drifting back to the edge, back to the desire to look for a boat, to track the arrival, or to worry about being left behind, that is perfectly acceptable. The mind is a traveler who has stood on the shore for a long time. It does not know how to stay still immediately. You can treat that desire with the same kindness you would show a tired passenger who is afraid of being forgotten. You don't need to scold the passenger. You don't need to force them to sit on the dock before they are ready. You can just notice the urge, acknowledge the fear that drives it, and then gently turn your head back toward the center of your own body. Breathe, soften, and return. The dock is patient. The river is waiting. It is not going anywhere, and neither are you. Feel the support of the mattress beneath you, the way the floor of your room is holding the structure of your life, even while you are resting. You are not a vessel that has missed its departure. You are the shore that has always been the destination. And being the shore is not a limitation. It is the very foundation of your capacity to rest. You can let the mooring rope go. You can let the water flow. You can let the night be exactly as it is, without your permission or your oversight. You are anchored here, rooted and real, and there is no journey left to prove. Observe the way your breath becomes quieter, the way the rhythm of your heart slows to match the stillness of the room. This is the natural outcome of lowering the rope. This is what happens when you stop trying to project your life into the distance and start honoring the immediate. You are becoming a person of the shore, a person of the dock, a person who understands that the only arrival that matters is the one you are inhabiting right now, in this breath, in this moment of quiet, in this safe, dark, and perfectly sufficient space. If you are feeling a lingering heaviness, do not be afraid. The mist of the river is supposed to settle. That is where the quiet is. That is where the truth finds its purchase. You don't need to lighten your heart by force. You only need to ground it in the truth of your own experience. Whatever you are carrying, the shame of being behind, the anxiety of the unknown, the memory of trying to catch what was always meant to pass, let it rest on the dock. Let it dissolve into the wood. The harbor is vast enough to hold your history, your confusion, and your hope, and it will turn all of it into the very substance that sustains your rest. You are doing perfectly well, and the work of the night is almost done. Just keep breathing, keep sensing the ground, and keep letting go of the rope. The world will continue to move without you, and you, at last, are free to rest in the sanctuary of your own life. And perhaps this is where the teaching begins to touch your own heart in the quiet realization that you are not the passenger searching for a sign, but the dock that is already whole, waiting for the mist to clear so you can finally see the ground beneath your own feet. In a remote village nestled within the jagged teeth of the western mountains, there lived a ferryman named Elias. Elias was celebrated for his speed and his absolute focus. He took immense pride in never letting his boat drift even an inch off the shortest path between the two riverbanks. He believed that the river was a test of his mastery, and that every second he saved was a victory over the unpredictable, swirling currents. He was a man who lived his entire life with his eyes fixed on the opposite shore, his hands white-knuckled around the worn, polished wood of his long oar, always bracing himself against the push of the water. He feared that if he ever relaxed his grip, if he ever let the current guide his path for even a moment, he would be swept away into a life of failure and chaos. One afternoon, during the peak of the autumn runoff, the river turned treacherous. The water was swollen, thick with silt, and roaring with a hunger that Elias had never seen in his decades on the water. As he pushed off from the bank, a massive piece of driftwood, hidden by the brown surface, slammed into his boat with the force of a falling tree. The impact didn't capsize him, but the sudden violent jolt wrenched the oar from his grasp. He watched, helpless, as the long, heavy pole was snatched away, tumbling into the frothing eddies and disappearing into the dark, churning heart of the gorge. Elias froze. He was in the middle of the river, stripped of his only tool, his boat now a helpless leaf in the grip of a power far greater than his own strength. His first instinct was a crushing wave of panic. He instinctively reached out for the oar that wasn't there, his muscles tightening in a futile, desperate attempt to fight the movement of the river. He felt the cold, hard weight of terror, the terror of a man who had built his entire identity around control, and was now staring directly into the mouth of the unknown. He braced himself for the crash, for the tipping of the boat, for the end of everything he had worked so hard to maintain. But as the seconds stretched into an agonizing silence, Elias noticed something strange. The boat didn't capsize. The river, while wild and roaring, wasn't actually trying to destroy him. It was simply moving with a tremendous focused energy. The boat bobbed, tipped, and swayed, but it stayed upright. It was being carried, not by his strength, but by the water itself. For the first time in his life, Elias let go of the invisible oar he had been clutching in his mind. He stopped leaning against the current. He stopped trying to steer the unsteerable. He collapsed onto the floor of the boat, his lungs heaving, his hands finally lying limp and empty on the wet wood. He watched the trees on the bank flicker past, not as obstacles to be navigated, but as living, moving companions. He realized that the river was actually taking him exactly where he needed to go, toward the quiet bend of the bank, where the water pooled and calmed. He hadn't needed to fight it. He had only needed to be present enough to survive the loss of his control. When the boat finally scraped gently against the soft mud of the downstream shore, Elias did not jump up to secure it with a frantic, learned habit. He simply sat there, listening to the river, watching the way the silt settled in the shallow pools. He did not become a different man that day. He didn't suddenly grow wings or reach a state of perfect, enlightened bliss. But he did go back to his work the next morning without the white-knuckled grip on his oar. He still rowed and he still navigated, but he no longer viewed the river as a personal enemy to be defeated. When the current pushed, he yielded. When the water was high, he didn't try to force the boat against the flow. He learned to work with the movement, to find the places where the river did the heavy labor for him. And when people asked him how he managed to cross so quickly without the strain he used to show, he would simply smile and point to the water, saying, "I used to think I was the one pulling the river, but it turns out the river has been carrying me all along." This subtle, quiet transformation is the doorway you are standing in tonight. You have been Elias, gripping that oar until your knuckles turned white, convinced that if you didn't force every moment to conform to your plan, the river of your life would swallow you whole. You have been treating your own thoughts, your responsibilities, and even your own quiet rest as if they were obstacles to be navigated with a rigid, desperate strength. But what if the river you are so afraid of, the uncertainty, the unexpected changes, the moments that didn't fit the picture, is actually carrying you exactly where you need to be? What if you stopped fighting the flow of your own life and simply allowed yourself to be held by it? You are not magically becoming perfect. You are not suddenly devoid of all worry or all struggle. But you are beginning to notice the difference between the rowing that is necessary and the rowing that is merely a symptom of your fear. When you feel that old, familiar tension rising in your chest, the urge to grasp at the outcome, the need to steer the moment toward a specific result, that is the moment you can choose to let go of the oar. You don't have to throw it away. You don't have to stop taking care of your life. You only have to stop using your struggle as an anchor. Try to see your internal resistance as the Elias of the story, bracing against a current that is already going to take him to the shore. What would happen if you simply breathed into the jolt rather than fighting against it? What would happen if you let your hands lie open on the wood of the boat instead of clenched into fists of effort? The river of your life doesn't need your panic to stay in motion. It has been flowing since before you arrived, and it will continue long after the final light of your day fades. Your worth is not determined by how hard you row. Your worth is found in the simple, quiet act of being a passenger who is finally willing to trust the water. This is the deeper teaching of the ferryman. Compassion for the struggle of the self is the only way to reach the shore without exhaustion. When you catch yourself bracing against the present moment, do not judge yourself for it. That brace is just an old way of trying to stay safe. Acknowledge it. Thank the part of you that wanted to protect you, and then let your shoulders drop. Let your breath become the rhythm of the water. You are moving, you are changing, you are being guided by forces that are far more patient and far more capable than your own worried mind. You don't need to capture the river. You don't need to map the currents. You don't need to save a single second of the journey. You only need to notice that you are currently floating, and that the water, while wild, is holding you. As you sink deeper into the feeling of this rest, let the image of the boat bobbing in the current guide your own sense of safety. You are drifting toward the bank. You are moving toward the stillness of the pool, and you can do so without a single frantic, straining movement of your own. Let the river of your own awareness flow, and let your body drift with it. There is no need to stand up and steer. There is no need to look for the shore with fearful, straining eyes. The shore is coming, the rest is waiting, and you are perfectly, entirely capable of being carried, without a single thing left for you to do. Notice how much lighter your limbs become when you stop fighting the flow. Notice how the pressure in your forehead dissolves when you realize the water has already taken care of the heavy lifting. You are simply the one who is witnessing the passage, and in that witness you are finally, truly arriving. You may still feel the desire to reach out for the oar, to verify that you are in control, but even that desire is just another part of the river. Let it float past. Don't grab it. Don't name it as a failure. Just let it drift away. A small piece of wood in a vast, dark, and supportive current. You are safe. You are held. You are exactly where the current intended you to be. And for tonight, that is the only destination you need to know. Rest in this knowledge. Let the river work for you, and simply breathe and let yourself be carried. You are doing well. The current is kind, and the bank is waiting for your return. The exhaustion you feel is rarely a result of the life you are living. It is the silent grinding tax you pay for the constant internal monitoring of that life. You have been treating your own presence as if it were a fragile cargo on a ship that might sink at any moment. And so you spend every waking second adjusting the load, checking the horizon for storms that haven't arrived, and retying the ropes that are already secure. This is the mechanism of control. The anxious, relentless fantasy that, if you are the one constantly checking the knots, you can prevent the river from being what it is. You judge your own rhythm, you critique your own pacing, and you analyze your own drift as if you were a faulty vessel that has been poorly constructed. But this is the work of a sailor who has forgotten that their very hands are made of the same water that moves the boat. When you direct your own judgment toward your own unfolding, you are not steering towards safety, you are merely fracturing the peace that was already present in the drift. You have been trying to earn your place on the river through the sheer, exhausting labor of your vigilance, believing that if you are worried enough, you will become worthy of the current's grace. But worry is a heavy, leaden anchor that does not reveal the way. It only keeps you tethered to the spot where you were already standing, staring at the water until you are blind to the light on its surface. The deepest mechanism of your suffering is the habit of turning the original, unavoidable pain of life into a permanent identity. Buddhist wisdom describes this as the cycle of the two arrows. The first arrow is the reality of your life, the moments when the current shifts unexpectedly. The times you feel the sudden chill of the mist, the inevitable realization that you cannot stop the flow, and the quiet loneliness of being a separate traveler on a vast, unpredictable river. This first arrow is the condition of being a human soul. It is the cold spray of the rapids, the sudden disappearance of the sun, and the natural weathering of your own spirit. We cannot stop the first arrow from landing. Life is, by its very nature, a series of shifts, surprises, and challenges that we did not choose and cannot fully command. To feel the impact of this, to feel hurt, to feel tired, to feel the weight of your own smallness is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of your genuine living connection to the world, however. The second arrow, the one that causes the most profound, lingering exhaustion, is the one you fire at yourself the moment the first one lands. This second arrow is your resistance, your self-judgment, and your refusal to accept that you are currently navigating a difficult stretch of water. It is the voice that says, I should be further along by now. Or if I were a better navigator, I wouldn't feel this uncertainty. Or I must immediately fix this before someone sees me drifting. When you fire this second arrow, you are no longer dealing with the initial encounter with the river. You are now struggling with the secondary injury of your own refusal to be human. You are taking a natural, temporary experience of challenge and turning it into a chronic, heavy state of shame. You are trying to use your mind to battle the current, and because the current is far larger and more fluid than the mind, the battle will always result in a feeling of defeat. You are draining your vitality by trying to maintain a narrative of mastery, when the truth of your life is one of constant, beautiful, and necessary yielding. Consider how often you rehearse the future or replay the past, trying to curate your own progress to ensure that your path remains unblemished. You are afraid of the mist, so you treat it like an enemy that must be anticipated and defeated through constant internal tracking. You fear that if you are not currently in the process of calculating your next move, you are lost or, worse, somehow unworthy of the river. But this fear of not knowing is not a form of wisdom, it is a cage. It is a way of holding your existence at arm's length so you don't have to experience the vulnerability of simply floating. When you replay the past, you are trying to use your mind to navigate a different river, believing that if you just understand the current differently, you will be safe from the rocks. When you rehearse the future, you are trying to steer a boat that isn't even in the water yet, believing that if you just anticipate every shift, you will be invulnerable to the tides. But the river of your life is not a fixed route, it is a living, breathing movement that requires your willingness to be carried, not your insistence on dictating the destination. True resilience, and the inner peace you have been quietly searching for, is not found in the absence of difficulty. It is found in a fundamental shift in how you relate to that difficulty. Peace is the capacity to sit in the middle of your own life, with all its hidden rocks, its rough patches, and its moments of genuine, raw uncertainty, and choose not to fire the second arrow. It is the ability to acknowledge, yes, this water is wild right now, without immediately tacking on the accusation that you are somehow wrong for being in it. When you stop feeding the second arrow, the original experience has a space in which to breathe. It stops being a permanent identity and starts being an event that is passing through you. You stop being the person who is the struggle and start being the person who hosts the struggle. This is the profound, quiet power of the awakened heart. It does not demand that the river stop being unpredictable. It only demands that you stop making the unpredictability your enemy. If you can notice the urge to control, name it with compassion. When you feel the need to seek approval from the bank, see it as the act of a traveler who is tired of being in the mist and is just looking for a single landmark to guide the way. You don't have to hate yourself for wanting that landmark. You only need to see that the safety you are seeking from the shore is already burning within the depth of your own awareness. You are not a faulty boat that needs to be coerced into perfection. You are a complete, unfolding expression of the living river. And your hesitations are not reasons for shame, they are the marks of your own unique path through the mountains. The suffering you have experienced, because you thought you needed to be the master of the current, is now beginning to lose its hold, because you are finally realizing that you were never the one who needed to force the motion. You were always the traveler who could host the memory of the light, the touch of the mist, and the deep, quiet silence of the gorge. The integration of this wisdom takes time, and you are not expected to change your entire way of being in a single evening. The practice is to observe your own mind with the same gentle, curious attention that the old woman gave to the reeds. When you feel the tension of the oar in your hands, simply take a breath. Notice the pattern. Notice the way you are trying to bend reality to fit a trajectory that is too narrow for your actual life. And then choose not to strain. Choose to let the oar rest. Choose to let the weight of your own expectations rest on the floor of the boat. You are doing something incredibly courageous simply by allowing yourself to be carried. You are participating in the unfolding of your own reality in a way that is honest, fluid, and profoundly kind. As you sit in this quiet, allow the feeling of the need to be navigating to dissipate into the dark, welcoming atmosphere of your room. You are not a project, you are a presence. You are not a course that requires constant correction. You are a reality that is ready to be held. There is nothing about you that is inherently broken, and there is no part of your story that needs to be smoothed away for you to deserve this rest. The mist of the harbor is clearing, and what remains is not a statue of perfection, but the simple, breathing truth of a person who is finally coming home to their own center. You are held by the same life that moves the river, and you can trust that life to take care of you. Even when you have stopped trying to steer the outcome, you are doing well, and you are far more whole than your anxieties have ever been willing to admit. There is no urgency here, and there is no expectation to reach a final, perfect dock tonight. Just breathe into the space you have cleared. Just let the rope stay where it is. You are finally, after all this time, safe enough to be exactly who you are, with all your beautiful, unpolished, and perfectly honest experiences intact. The water is moving, the night is deep, and for this moment, you are allowed to simply float. The transition from the stillness of the riverside into the rapid, relentless rhythm of your everyday life is where the true narrative of your healing is actually written. It is easy to find a sense of clarity when you are listening to the story of a ferryman who finally stopped fighting the current. But when you are caught in the middle of a Tuesday, staring at a screen while waiting for a response that refuses to arrive, the heavy rope of your own expectations often feels far more burdensome than it did in the quiet of the mountain. You might find yourself checking your phone for some kind of external signal, hoping that a single notification will settle the flutter in your chest and confirm that you are worthy, that you are remembered, that you are still a vital part of the world. When the reply does not come, you may feel your mind immediately beginning to reach for the mooring line, trying to adjust the position of your own worth, trying to find an explanation for the silence that makes you feel small or forgotten. In those moments of modern solitude, you are trying to force a shape onto the day that it refuses to take. Instead of following the thread of that panic, try taking one breath before you reach for the screen again, just one. That breath is not a solution to the silence, but it is a way of reclaiming your own agency. It is an act of recognizing that you can exist in the uncertainty without immediately needing to fill it with a defensive, weary performance of your own adequacy. Maybe you find yourself lying awake long after the house has gone quiet, replaying a conversation where you felt clumsy, exposed, or misunderstood. You are back in that moment, mentally reenacting your words, trying to imagine how you could have been steadier, more composed, or more impactful. You are attempting to fight a ghost from days ago, trying to change the trajectory of an event that has already settled into the riverbed. This is the habit of the traveler who fears the mist. You believe that if you study the error long enough, you will prevent it from ever happening again. But this is the second arrow, the injury you inflict upon your own peace to make up for the limitation that already occurred. When you catch yourself doing this, try to visualize that memory not as a stain on your identity, but as a single ripple on the water that has already passed the dock. It happened. It is part of the landscape. You do not need to pull it out of the past and press it back into your current life to justify your worth. You do not need to discard the entire experience. You can simply acknowledge that the ripple occurred. Forgive yourself for being a person who is still learning to navigate the winds of time. And let your focus return to the texture of your sheets, the weight of your body, and the fact that you are safe in this room, right now. There is often a pervasive pressure to feel like you are behind in life, that others have mastered the art of being, while yours remains a series of revisions and crossed-out lines. You might feel the burden of performing your stability, of keeping your hands steady on the oars, even when you are feeling hollow or fragile. You offer help to others, you smile through the fatigue, you maintain the appearance of a master of your own destiny. But inside, you feel the strain of holding up a narrative that you are terrified will be judged as empty. This is the exhaustion of the traveler who has become a statue on the dock. It is the effort of maintaining a version of yourself that is meant for a portrait, at the expense of the person who just needs to feel the cool, damp shadow of their own sanctuary. You do not have to be the repository of every achievement. You are allowed to be the space around the experience. You are allowed to admit that you are tired, to say I do not have the river figured out yet, or to simply step away from the oars for an evening. Your worth is not a transaction. It is not something you have to earn through your output, your charm, or the perfection of your composure. It is inherent, and it is here, whether you are productive or whether you are still. Consider the times you feel the sudden, sharp need to control a relationship, to force an outcome because you are terrified of losing the connection or being revealed as less than. You might find yourself over-explaining, apologizing for your presence, or checking in too often, all in an effort to keep the walls of the relationship from crumbling under the pressure of your own neediness. But when you pull a boundary too tight, you don't strengthen the connection, you make it brittle. You make it prone to snapping under the pressure of your own anxiety. Real connection is found in the spaces where there is no tension. It is found when you can allow the other person to be who they are, without needing them to fulfill a role in your internal ledger of security. You can care deeply without gripping the oar so hard your hands bleed. You can offer love without making it a currency of validation. This requires a specific kind of courage, the courage to risk being seen without the display of your defenses, and the courage to trust that you are enough even if the other person does not mirror your efforts exactly as you expected. You may also struggle with the feeling that you have not earned your rest, that if you aren't constantly solving, analyzing, or preparing for the next demand, you are being irresponsible. You might feel guilty for sitting in a quiet room without a task, or for closing your eyes before the day is perfectly in order. This is the belief that rest is a reward to be unlocked by your productivity, rather than a fundamental necessity of the living, breathing human form. You do not have to earn the right to exist. You do not have to prove your value to the world before you are allowed to close your eyes. When that guilt arises, treat it like a dry, dusty leaf that is blown onto your dock. Acknowledge that the guilt is a habit, a voice from the river that equates survival with endless pulling. You can choose to set it down. You can choose to rest simply because you are here, and the body, like the dock itself, requires seasons of stillness to remain resonant. It is helpful to remember that mindfulness is not an escape from these modern pressures. It is a way to inhabit them differently. A breath before you answer an email is not a waste of time. It is a form of wisdom that protects the integrity of your own spirit. Choosing not to engage in a toxic spiral of comparison. When you see someone else's highlight reel on a screen is not weakness. It is a profound act of self-discipline. You are creating a boundary between the world's constant noise and your own internal sanctuary. Every time you consciously return to the present, you are choosing to walk the path without trying to turn it into a battlefield. You are saying, I will meet the world when it arrives, but for now I am here in my own skin, and that is sufficient. Even in the smallest moments, the way you hold a cup of tea, the way you listen to the sound of the rain, the way you walk through a doorway, you can practice this. You do not need to leave your life to find the garden. The garden is the attention you bring to these moments. When you feel the familiar pull to worry, pause and ask yourself, is this worry helping me? Is it solving anything? Or is it just the rhythm of the traveler, straining at the oar for a shore that hasn't arrived? If it is just the straining, then let it sit. You do not have to carry the burden of the rope tonight. You can step away. You can soften your jaw, and you can let the silence of the room be your guide. This does not mean the difficulties of your life will vanish. The responsibilities will still be there. The world will still be complex, and the path will remain demanding. But you will meet these things with a different spirit. You will meet them as someone who is rooted, someone who knows that their identity is not tied to the speed at which they cross the water. You will meet them with the quiet, steady strength of a person who understands that the beauty of life is in the seasons, the rain, and the willingness to let the truth emerge in its own time. You are learning that you are not the builder of your own destiny. You are the one who gets to participate in the flow for a brief, precious span of time. And that is enough. It is more than enough. Stay with this feeling of lightness. The next moments are yours to simply inhabit, without trying to capture them, or wall them into something they are not yet. You are doing perfectly well, and the night is finally holding you with a gentleness you are ready to receive. The river is behind you, the oars are set aside, and you are finally entering the space where the noise is allowed to dissolve, unheeded, unmanaged, and perfectly at peace in the dark. The frayed mooring rope is lying still and forgotten on the damp, weathered planks of the dock, and you are no longer the one who must guard the harbor. You have safely retreated from the edge of the rushing, mist-filled river, leaving behind the need to track, to record, or to anticipate the coming of the next vessel. The river will continue to flow, surging with its own hidden currents and secret destinations. But you are not the one who needs to row. You are not the one who needs to steer. You are the dock itself, solid, stationary, and entirely at home in the quiet dark of the evening. Feel the weight of your body sinking into the mattress, your limbs growing heavy and rooted, mimicking the deep, submerged pilings that hold the dock against the pressure of the tide. There is a profound, quiet safety in this release, a realization that the ground was always there, waiting to hold you, even when your mind was back on the water, lost in the restless, swirling urgency of trying to be somewhere other than where you are. The labor of being the chronicler of your own existence is finished for tonight. You are not a collector of passing silhouettes, but a harbor of stillness, and the harbor requires nothing of you but your presence. Feel the tension draining from your jaw, the hard, clamped lines of the dockmaster smoothing into the soft, unmoving face of one who has finally returned to the shore. Your hands are uncurled, your palms are resting in the cradle of the dark, and your heart is beating with the slow, steady rhythm of the tide against the wood. This is the truth of your existence, not the frantic straining at the oar, but the quiet, resonant pulse of the life that is breathing itself without your oversight or your anxiety. Let the shadows of the room be a gentle, protective mist. Let the silence of the night be the sanctuary you have sought in the passing of boats. You are anchored here, rooted and real, and there is no distance left to navigate. Each breath is a slow, deepening invitation to let go of the last remnants of the mooring rope. As you inhale, imagine the coolness of the riverside air filling your chest, and as you exhale, imagine the grit and the friction of your mental record-keeping dissolving into the dark. You are becoming as still as a quiet cove at midnight, waiting for the natural, unforced unfolding of the morning. There is no need to rush the arrival, and there is no need to fear the current. The seasons will turn, the river will pass, and you will be there, ready to inhabit the shore. But for now, you are simply the life that rests. You are the dock, you are the wood, and you are the quiet, dark space where everything is allowed to be exactly as it is, without being measured, without being sketched, and without being solved. The rope is coiled and silent, abandoned on the planks, while you are warm, heavy, and sinking deeper into the restorative, dreamless calm of the night. There is a deep, ancient wisdom in this surrender. You are not losing your way, you are returning to the source of your own stability. The mind that worries, the mind that catalogs, the mind that clings to the phantom fairy. All of these are just travelers, passing shadows on the vast, open wall of your awareness. You are the wall. You are the foundation that holds the shadow. And you are the stillness that allows the river to be so remarkably, beautifully active. Nothing is broken. Nothing is missing. Nothing needs to be documented before you can close your eyes and drift into the soft, velvet dark. You are simply a traveler who has reached the end of the long harbor, and the journey has led you at last to the gate of your own sanctuary. Let the door close behind you. Let the heavy ropes remain where they lay. Let the mist dissolve like smoke in the moonlight. There is nothing left to record, and there is no schedule left to keep. The harbor is still. The night is deep. The earth is holding you, firm and patient, in the palm of its ancient hand. You can stop guarding the horizon. You can stop bracing against the flow. You can stop the frantic, lonely work of being the one who must capture a masterpiece for the river to notice. The river is only a passage, and the passage is only a drift, and the drift is not your responsibility. You are free to let the life unfold without your constant interpretation. You are free to let the night take you into its cool, protective center, where the only thing that matters is the rhythm of your own quiet pulse. Drift down, deeper still, into the dark, rich loam of this piece. The ore is gone. The sketches are fading. You are finally, completely, and deeply at home in your own unmoving stillness. If the life you were trying so hard to capture has been waiting in the silence you were trying so hard to record, what would happen if you simply let the night hold you until you were ready to wake as yourself?